honoured if you would join us.
Greetings and welcome to another YouTube episode of Film Stories with me, Dan Cooper. Today here on the channel we have an interview with producer Mali Elfman. Mali was the producer for The Party's Just Beginning, the Karen Gillan film in which she makes the directorial debut. She also wrote the film as well as starring in it. It's a cracking film, and I urge you all to go out and see it. And here we've got the story of the film's production, as told by Mali, and she also talks about some of the challenges of getting an independent film before audiences. You can also find more details and an interview with Karen Gillan herself in the upcoming issue of Film Stories, the print magazine, but more details about that after the interview. Enjoy. So, Mali, welcome onto the channel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're really welcome. Tell us just briefly what you're a producer. What does that entail?
That's such a great question. Everything. It's funny that you say that because I remember when I was a kid, I went with my dad to go visit a film set. And I guess I was sitting there and I was like, what does that person do? And he's like, they do the wardrobe, and that person designs all the costumes, does everything. What does that person do? That's the director. And they're telling everybody the vision. What's that person do? It's an actor. And then I pointed at a producer. I said, what's that person do? He said, he's a producer. And I said, what does that person do? And he just paused. And he's like, everything. And I remember being like, I have no idea what that is, and being very fascinated. And it would be many, many years later until I decided. I don't know that anybody ever decides that they want to be a producer. I feel like you just become a producer, and that's like what you have to do for the rest of your life, because if there was any other option, I should probably do that, because producing is so challenging in so many ways. But I can't. I love it completely and totally. So I just have to do it for the rest of my life and be tortured.
Yeah, I think maybe of all the kind of professions within the film industry, it's the one that is the most misconstrued. People assume that you spend your time riding around in limos and going to parties and schmoozing, but it's really you really cover a lot of ground, I imagine.
Well, also the thing is that there's a million different types of producers, and I really feel like we do need more titles, because obviously you have a line producer or you have an executive producer, but that really doesn't cover it all. For me specifically, why I got involved in this was, I was a writer, I was an actor originally, and I was seeing all these projects and seeing my friends write these things and trying to direct these things, and none of them could get made. And that infuriated me. And so I realized that the only way to get those things made was to figure out a way to do it. And so that's how I originally got started as a producer. And I also worked for Missy Stabile, a line producer, much earlier on, and was enamored with the way that she worked in the world. But what I like to do is, it's kind of a fun expression, but cradle to grave, as they like to call it. I start with, like, for instance, with The Party's Just Beginning. Karen came to me 6 years ago now. Through way of Mike Flanagan. She was working on Oculus, and I was working with Mike on Before I Wake. And she had a script. And I remember I sat down with her. We got a glass of wine in a pub. And she said, I want to make this script. And I mainly produce horror films. That's kind of my thing. But I read this, and I had never read something that I felt like I understood so well. That this isn't my story. I'm not a girl from Inverness. I did not have my friend jump, go through the experience. I don't actually want to give that away, but go through any of those experiences. And yet I completely related, because I felt like for any woman who has survived her 20s, she has had to learn a lot of these lessons and go through this. And so it just felt important for me. So I remember I sat down with Karen and I said, I want to help you make this. She said, great. And I said, we need to find you a director. And she said, I'm the director. And I was like, oh, have you ever directed before? And in her very optimistic way, she's like, no. And I was like, maybe we should try doing that a couple of times. So we made one short that starred Rose McIver and James Ransom called Coward, that I believe premiered at Edinburgh Film Festival.
Right.
And then we made a second short film in which she did exactly what she did for The Party's Just Beginning, wrote, directed, and starred in it. And that was Conventional, which is actually the basis of our next film that we're going to be doing together. And then, so the nice thing for me as a producer is that I got to work with Karen, and I got to know what type of style she liked, what she wanted, the problems that she was going to, come across on the way. So by the time that we got into her feature, I kind of knew it was pretty effortless. I kind of always knew what she needed before she even needed it herself. Like, there was a lot of her walking over and being like, I'm going to need this, this, this. And I'm like this? And she's like, yeah. So it was really nice. And I often recommend I love working with directors on short films before features because every single director has their own way of working.
Yeah.
And you get to kind of figure that out. So anyways, I started with the creative. We worked on that script for years. We took it out and pitched it. We made 2 short films. Finally, we got to the feature. And then it's also, you have to get into post. And, you know, Karen will admit, we kind of broke this film in post, or more or less. Her and the editor, Brett Bachman, sat in a room, and they were just, because there's 2 timelines, there's so many ways of kind of recreating this film.
Yeah.
And they broke it, and then they found it again in a way that was even more beautiful than it was ever intended. And very proud of that. And then there's the whole, now you got to go to a film festival, and now you got to go get distributors, and now you got to go get people to help you sell, and you got to go get marketing teams, and then you actually finally get to release the film back in the UK where it started. But that's been, you know, almost a 7-year process of working together. So it's a lot of different elements. I will say that for me, the worst part about it is the riding around in limos and having to go on red carpets and premiere the film. I think it's wonderful, and I'm always proud of it, but I much prefer the digging into the dirt and getting creative and doing that side of things. But it's everything, and the most important thing is that it's finding a vision that you truly believe in, because the road is so hard ahead, so you have to believe in it and supporting it truly and honestly, and I think that's the important thing.
What was it? I mean, you've said that it spoke to you as maybe not hailing from Inverness, and maybe not experiencing some of the trauma that the character in the film, which is it's a great film, by the way, experiences.
Yeah.
But you said that it spoke to you as a woman who survived her 20s. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, surviving your 20s is hard. I think you go into them thinking that you know a lot, and you come out of them just knowing how stupid you were in the first place. And maybe not stupid or naive, but I think it was, you know, for me with this film, I think the thing that connected me to, as we were talking about certain issues, because there are issues with consent, and there are sexual assault issues, and there are some understanding one's sexuality and where that places in the world, and also the idea of, I guess it's really a coming of age story. I mean, it's about a girl who goes through a tragedy and then doesn't know how to get herself out of it. And I think that's actually probably what I could relate to the most, is the idea of, I didn't have that story, but I did have something. I don't know many people. In fact, as I went around and have been talking this film, and we've taken this film kind of on our own little mini tour, it's spoken to so many people in those ways, and that I'm so excited to hear that whenever somebody tells me their story or speaks out, because I don't actually know a person today who hasn't had some type of experience, some type of trauma that they didn't know how to get past, that they actually had a moment of, I don't know how to solve my way through this. And how they respond is completely different. Some people get very quiet, some people act out. You know, I think for the character of Lucy in the film, what I really liked about it was that she didn't just, she's not playing depression like, oh, I'm sad and I sit in a room. Depression can manifest in a variety of different ways. And for her, it's really acting out and hurting herself, unable to actually get through the pain. She brings the pain to her. And I think that understanding, I remember when we talked about the end of this film for so long, we're like, what is the meaning of this film? And Karen was very, very clear on communication. On the fact is just going and saying to somebody, I'm not okay, is one of the most empowering things you can do, and you should feel okay doing that. And I just think that that's such an important message, especially right now.
It contains that message after really taking the audience through a really poignant and really well crafted kind of narrative in terms of the way you use a kind of circular structure that just is both absorbing and horrifying at the same time, and even without wishing to be too spoilery, because I urge everyone to go and see this, knowing as little about it as possible. But just
maybe I shouldn't have said that before.
The way, no. I mean, we're talking about the themes, and I think hopefully by discussing the themes, people will be intrigued enough to go out and see it. But yeah, it's a really great film. I mean, we've got a critic in the UK, a film critic called Mark Kermode, who is one of our kind of celebrated critics. Yeah, and I heard him say just the other day, actually, it struck a chord with me when I watched your film. He said the problem with British films isn't production, it's distribution. Would you agree with that? How challenging is it been getting the film in front of audiences?
It's been very challenging, and I don't know if that's UK films or just indie films in general that have difficult subject matter, and subject matter that isn't, it's what's funny is that this is a very emotionally built film. So even when you watch it, it's not plot driven; it's emotionally driven. So thinking about it from that perspective, it's not necessarily an easy paint by the numbers film. It is emotionally driven by somebody's trauma and figuring out how to get past that. I think that people don't know exactly what to do with that, and it's ironic because I think that's what we need in the world right now more than just about anything, is that it's not easy to get through things, and there's not always a straight road, and it's not always, apparent what it might be, and then you have to figure it out. And so, and that's what this film really does, and for me, it's the emotional journey of that. I will say that we got to premiere at Tribeca Film Festival, and we got to take the film around to Inverness Film Festival, and we went to Glasgow.
Yeah.
We actually went to the Cool Connections in Moscow. And one of my favorite parts about the release of this film has been screening it in front of people and then hearing their stories and hearing their questions, because I think that there is a market for this film, and people really want it, and yet it's hard if it's not something that is a horror film made for 13 to 18-year-olds, or 13 to whatever. If it's not a comedy feeding the 18 to 35 bracket, if it's not this, it's not something that necessarily fits into something easy. And I do think that a lot of UK filmmakers are bold enough to take those chances and go out and make those types of films.
Agreed.
And sometimes they work in the marketplace, and sometimes they struggle along. I think, the nice thing about this film going on demand is that I do hope that being more accessible in people's homes, that they might also be able to take a little bit more of a risk there, if they're not able to go out to theaters. But it is, I would say definitely with the UK, but I'm seeing it out here in the US as well, with Friends films that I think are absolutely genius, that I would love to see getting big releases. And I think it's just a hard time in the market right now.
So thanks to Mali for being on the channel. We've got more with Mali in an upcoming episode, and thanks to you for tuning in. Do check out The Pot Is Just Beginning should you get a chance. It's really worthy of your time. In the meantime, if you want more film stories, you can of course check out our print magazine, also Film Stories Junior, our other print magazine written by young people for young people. On top of that, of course, you can check out our website where there's long form writing and news stories every day, filmstories.co.uk, and of course there you can find details of how to get a hold of Film Stories, the print magazines. On top of that, of course, you can find us on Twitter at Film Stories Pod, Facebook at Film Stories Online, and of course there's our amazing podcasts, which you can find a podcast downloader of your choice. That's all from me from this week, and I'll see you back here next week with another YouTube Film Stories. Bye bye now.